You tap your phone, barely glance at the screen, and within a second or two, it calmly says, "Transaction successful." No loading bar, no drama. It feels almost boring now. But that moment is far more complicated than it looks, because what you just did wasn't only about money. It was about time, extremely precise time. Most people assume a bank transaction is simple. You send money, the bank checks your balance, and the payment goes through. End of story. But that explanation skips the one thing banks are actually obsessed with: knowing exactly when something happened, down to fractions of a second. Because in the financial world, time is not a background detail. Time decides the outcome. Imagine two things happening almost simultaneously. You make a payment from your phone, and at nearly the same moment, another transaction hits the same account. Maybe it's an ATM withdrawal, maybe it's an automatic bill payment. These events are so close together that, to a human, they look like they happened at the same time. But for a bank, almost the same time is not good enough. One of them must come first, and the order changes everything. If your balance is limited, the first transaction might succeed, the second might fail. Reverse the order, and the result flips. So the bank isn't just recording transactions, it's enforcing order. And order only exists if everyone agrees on what now actually means. Here's where things quietly get messy. Your phone has a clock. The payment terminal has a clock. Your bank's server has a clock. The payment network has its own systems, often in another city or country, with their own clocks too. These machines are not sitting next to each other, and they are not naturally in sync. Even the best computers slowly drift apart in time. This drift doesn't sound scary at first. We're talking milliseconds, maybe microseconds. But in a system processing millions of transactions every minute, that tiny drift is enough to create confusion. And confusion is dangerous when money is involved. So banks learned long ago that internal clocks are not enough. They need a single, absolute reference for time. You might think the internet solves this. After all, computers constantly talk to each other online. But the internet was never designed for perfect timing. Data packets get delayed, routes change, latency fluctuates. So any time signal that depends only on the internet is always slightly uncertain. It's a very smart estimate, but still an estimate. For social media, that's fine. For video streaming, that's fine. For money, it's not. This is why banks depend on something far more stable than the internet: atomic time. Atomic clocks don't measure time the way normal clocks do. They measure the vibration of atoms, which is so consistent that these clocks are accurate beyond human intuition. They won't lose a second for millions of years. The problem is, atomic clocks aren't practical to install everywhere. They're expensive, complex, and not something you put inside every bank branch or data center. So instead of bringing the clock to every system, we do something smarter. We put the clocks somewhere they can reach everyone at once. We put them in space. GPS satellites are often thought of as navigation tools, but that's only half the story. At their core, GPS satellites are some of the most reliable time broadcasters ever built. Each one carries multiple atomic clocks, constantly sending ultra-precise time signals down to Earth. Banks listen to those signals. Stock exchanges listen to them. Telecom networks, power grids, data centers, they all listen. Because when everyone listens to the same clock, the entire system stays aligned. No debates, no guessing, just sequence. So when your transaction enters the banking system, it's not floating around randomly. It's S-stamped with a precise moment in time that matches millions of other systems around the world. That timestamp decides its position in line, relative to every other transaction happening at that moment. This becomes even more critical when you look beyond everyday payments. In financial markets, trades happen at unbelievable speeds. Algorithms compete in microseconds. Entire strategies are built around being faster than competitors by tiny fractions of time. Without satellite-synchronized clocks, those markets wouldn't just slow down, they would become untrustworthy. That's why, in many countries, financial institutions are legally required to synchronize their systems to precise external time sources. Not because it sounds impressive, but because when something goes wrong, investigators need to reconstruct events in exact order. The first question is always the same: what happened first? Now bring this back to your phone again. When you tap pay, your action becomes part of a global sequence of events. Your phone marks the moment, the terminal marks the moment, the bank marks the moment. And all of those moments are aligned to the same invisible clock coming from space. You never see it. You never think about it. And that's the point. The system works precisely because it stays out of your awareness. It gives you confidence without explanation. But that confidence depends on something very fragile: uninterrupted, precise time. Which leads to a question most people never ask. Not what happens when satellites fail completely, but what happens if time goes missing just briefly, in the wrong place, at the wrong moment? Because that's where the story gets uncomfortable. So what actually happens when that invisible time signal stumbles? Not disappears forever, not a Hollywood-style blackout, just a brief disruption, a tiny uncertainty, a moment where systems hesitate because the clock they trust isn't perfectly clear. In most industries, that kind of uncertainty is annoying. In banking, it's dangerous. When time becomes unreliable, systems don't immediately fail in dramatic ways. Instead, they become cautious. Transactions slow down, extra checks are triggered. Some payments get delayed, others are temporarily rejected. From the outside, it looks like a random glitch. From the inside, it's a system protecting itself from making the wrong decision. Because when you're not sure about time, the safest move is often to do nothing. This is why, during rare GPS disruptions or time sync anomalies, financial networks don't collapse, but they do become conservative. They prioritize consistency over speed. And consistency always comes back to one question: can we still trust the order of events? What makes this even more fascinating is that banks don't rely on just one satellite or one signal. They build layers of redundancy, multiple satellite systems, backup clocks, local oscillators that hold time briefly if the external signal fades, entire teams whose job is to monitor drift measured in billionths of a second. All of this effort exists for one simple goal: making sure that when two things happen almost at the same time, the system never has to guess which came first. Because guessing breaks trust, and trust is the real currency here. Think about how casually we trust digital money today. You don't count cash. You don't ask for receipts most of the time. You don't even wait for confirmation beyond a quick notification. That confidence only exists because behind the scenes, the system is extremely strict about time. Now zoom out even further. Banking is just one layer of a much larger time-dependent world. The same satellite time signals synchronize mobile networks so calls don't overlap and data doesn't collide. Power grids use them to balance electricity across massive regions. Data centers rely on them to keep records consistent across continents. Modern civilization runs on shared time. And the reason satellites are so powerful in this role is simple. They don't belong to any single place on Earth. A satellite doesn't care if you're in a city, a village, or the middle of the ocean. The signal reaches everyone equally. That neutrality is what makes global synchronization possible, which leads to something slightly unsettling. The more digital our world becomes, the more invisible time becomes, and the more dependent we are on it being correct. You don't notice time working when everything goes right. You only notice it when things feel off. A payment pending longer than usual, a transaction that fails without explanation, a system that suddenly asks you to try again later. Those moments aren't always about money. Often, they're about time confidence. Now let's flip the perspective. Imagine a world without shared global time, each system trusting its own clock, each network slightly out of sync, each transaction carrying uncertainty. In that world, disputes become common, fraud becomes harder to detect, accountability weakens, and trust slowly erodes. That's why precision timekeeping isn't just a technical achievement. It's a social one. It allows strangers to transact without knowing each other. It allows systems to cooperate without direct communication. It allows fairness to exist at scale. When you think about it that way, satellite time isn't just supporting banking. It's supporting trust between people who will never meet. There's also an irony here. We often think of space technology as futuristic, distant, almost irrelevant to daily life. Rockets, planets, exploration. But one of the most impactful uses of space happens quietly, every second, without applause. Satellites keep the world agreeing on now, and now is far more powerful than it sounds. Because without a shared now, there is no shared reality for systems, only conflicting versions of events. This is why time synchronization is treated as infrastructure, not innovation. It's not meant to be noticed. It's meant to be reliable, boring even. And yet, your phone payment depends on it. There's a final layer to this story that often goes unspoken. As digital money evolves, instant payments, real-time settlements, global transfers, the tolerance for time errors shrinks even further. Systems are moving faster, not slower. Decisions that once had seconds now have milliseconds, which means time precision is becoming more valuable, not less. Future financial systems won't just ask, did this happen? They'll ask, did this happen before or after everything else, and can we prove it? That proof comes from time. So the next time you tap your phone and see that familiar confirmation message, pause for a moment, not to worry, not to overthink, just to appreciate the invisible coordination behind it. Somewhere above you, atomic clocks are ticking in near-perfect harmony. Signals are traveling at the speed of light. Systems across the planet are quietly agreeing on the same moment in time, all so that your coffee payment feels effortless. And that might be the most impressive part of all. Not that satellites help banks move money faster, but that they help the world agree on what happened and when it happened. Because in the end, money isn't just a number. It's a story told in the language of time.